Chapter 22, Evidence. I spent the next night at Phoebe's house, but I could hardly sleep. Phoebe kept saying, "Hear that noise?" And she would jump up to peer out the window in case it was the lunatic returning for the rest of us. Once, she saw Mrs. Cadaver in her garden with a torch. I must have fallen asleep after that, because I woke to the sound of Phoebe crying in her sleep. When I woke her, she denied it. I was not crying. I most certainly was not. In the morning, Phoebe refused to get up. Her father rushed into her room with 2 ties slung around his neck and his shoes in his hand. "Phoebe, you're late." "I'm sick," she said. "I have a fever and a stomachache." Her father placed his hand on her forehead, looked deep into her eyes, and said, "I'm afraid you have to go to school." "I'm sick, honest," she said. "It might be cancer." "Phoebe, I know you're worried, but there's nothing we can do. We have to get on with things. We can't malinger." "We can't what?" Phoebe said. "Malinger. Here, look it up." He tossed her the dictionary from the desk and tore down the hall. "My mother is missing, and my father hands me a dictionary?" Phoebe said. She looked up malinger and read the definition. To pretend to be ill in order to escape duty or work. She slammed the book shut. "I'm not malingering." Prudence was running around in a frenzy. "Where's my white blouse? Phoebe, have you seen? I could have sworn." She was pulling things out of her closet and flinging them onto the bed. Phoebe reluctantly got dressed, pulled a wrinkled blouse and skirt from the closet. Downstairs, the kitchen table was bare. No bowls of muesli. Phoebe said, "No glasses of orange juice or whole wheat toast." She touched a white sweater hanging on the back of a chair. "My mother's favorite white cardigan," she said. She snatched the sweater and waved it in front of her father. "Look at this. Would she leave this behind? Would she?" He reached forward and touched its sleeve, rubbing the fabric between his fingers for a moment. "Phoebe, it's an old sweater." Phoebe put it on over her wrinkled blouse. I was uneasy because everything that had happened at Phoebe's that morning reminded me of when my mother left. For weeks, my father and I fumbled around like ducks in a fit. Nothing was where it was supposed to be. The house took on a life of its own, hatching piles of dishes and laundry and newspapers and dust. My father must have said, "I'll be jiggered," about 3,000 times. The chickens were fidgety, the cows were skittish, and the pigs were sullen and glum. Our dog, Moody Blue, whimpered for hours on end. When my father said that my mother was not coming back, I refused to believe it. I brought all her postcards down from my room and said, would she have written these if she was not coming back? And just like Phoebe, who waved her mother's sweater in front of her father, I had brought a chicken in from the coop. "Would Mom leave her favorite chicken?" I demanded. "She loves this chicken." What I really meant was, would Mom leave me? She loves me. At school, Phoebe slammed her books on her desk. Beth Ann said, "Hey, Phoebe, your blouse is a little wrinkled." "My mother's away," Phoebe said. "I iron my own clothes now," Beth Ann said. "I even iron." "My mother's gone," Phoebe said. "I heard you, Phoebe. You can iron your own clothes, you know." To me, Phoebe whispered, "I think I'm having a genuine heart attack." I thought about a baby rabbit we once had. When my mother found it in the field, cuddled against its dead mother, she brought the rabbit down to the barn and we nursed it. I slept in the barn with it for a whole week. Then one day our dog, Moody Blue, caught the baby rabbit in its mouth. Moody Blue was only carrying it around. She was not actually lunching on the rabbit. I finally coaxed Moody Blue to drop it, and when I picked up the rabbit, its heart was beating faster than anything. Faster and faster it went, and then, all of a sudden, its heart stopped. I took the rabbit to my mother. She said, "It's dead, Salamanca." "It can't be dead. It was alive just a minute ago." Phoebe said, "I'm going to the nurse. Come with me, please." In the nurse's office, Phoebe explained that she was having a heart attack. The nurse told Phoebe to lie down. 5 minutes later, the nurse took Phoebe's pulse, said that the heart attack probably subsided, and sent both of us on to class. I wondered what would happen if all of a sudden Phoebe's heart beat itself out like the rabbit's, and she fell down and died right there at school. Her mother would not even know Phoebe was dead. Later, Mary Lou said to Phoebe, "Beth Ann mentioned something about your mother being away." Christy and Megan gathered around. "Is your mother on a business trip?" Christy said. My mother is always going to Paris on business trips. My mother is a journalist, you know. Megan smiled. My father travels all the time. He just got back from Tokyo. If it was a very important meeting, I can assure you. Next week, he is going to Saudi Arabia. He's building an airport there. Christy said, so where is your mother? On a business trip? Phoebe nodded. Where did she go? Megan said. Tokyo? Saudi Arabia? Phoebe said. London. Oh, London, Christy said. My mother's been there lots of times. My father goes there regularly, Megan said. Did she send any postcards yet? Christy asked. My mother sends the most humorous postcards. Some have pictures of people with blue hair. Oh, Megan said. My father sent me one of those. Phoebe turned to me with a puzzled expression on her face. I think she was surprised at what she had said, but I knew exactly why she had lied. It was easier sometimes. I had done this myself when people asked about my mother. Don't worry, Phoebe, I said. She snapped. I am not worried. I had done that too. Whenever anyone tried to console me about my mother, I had nearly bitten their heads off. I was a complete ornery old donkey. When my father would say, you must feel terrible, I denied it. I don't, I told him. I don't feel anything at all. But I did feel terrible. I didn't want to wake up in the morning, and I was afraid to go to sleep at night. By lunchtime, people were coming at Phoebe in all directions. How long will your mother be in London? Mary Lou asked. Is she having tea with the Queen? Tell her to go to Covent Garden, Christy said. My mother just loves Covent Garden. It's Covent Garden, Cabbage Head, Mary Lou said. It isn't, Christy said. I'm sure it's Covent Garden. By the time we reached English class, even Mr. Berkway had heard the news. I hear your mother's in London. Phoebe, he said. London, London. The Globe Theatre, Shakespeare, Dickens, After school, we walked home with Ben and Mary Lou. Phoebe wouldn't say a word. What's the matter, freebie? Asked Ben. Talk. Out of the blue, I said, everyone has his own agenda. Ben tripped over the curb, and Mary Lou gave me a peculiar look. I kept hoping that Phoebe's mother would be home, even though the door was locked. I kept hoping. Are you sure you want me to come in? I said. Maybe you want to be alone? Phoebe said, I don't want to be alone. Call your dad and see if you can stay for dinner again. Inside, Phoebe called, Mom, and walked through the house, looking in each room. That's it, Phoebe said. I'm going to search for clues, for evidence that the lunatic has been here and dragged my mother off. She was really getting carried away. I wanted to tell her that she was just fishing in the air, and that probably her mother had not been kidnapped. But I could see that Phoebe didn't want to hear it. When my mother did return, I imagined all sorts of things. Maybe she had cancer and didn't want to tell us and was hiding in Idaho. Maybe she got knocked on the head and had amnesia and was wandering around Lewiston, not knowing who she really was, or thinking she was someone else. My father would say, she does not have cancer, Sal. She does not have amnesia. Those are fishes in the air. But I didn't believe him. Maybe he was trying to protect her, or me. Phoebe prowled through the house, examining the walls and the carpet, searching for bloodstains. She found several suspicious spots and unidentifiable hair strands. Phoebe marked the spots with pieces of adhesive tape and collected the hairs in an envelope. Prudence was in a lather when she came home. I made it, she said. I made it. And she was jumping all about. I made cheerleading. When Phoebe reminded her that Mother had been kidnapped, Prudence said, Oh, Phoebe, Mom wasn't kidnapped. She stopped jumping and looked around the kitchen. So, what are we supposed to have for dinner? Phoebe rummaged around in the cupboards. Prudence opened the freezer compartment and said, Look at this. For a terrible moment, I thought perhaps she'd found some chopped up body parts in there. Maybe, just maybe, Phoebe was right. Maybe a lunatic had done away with her mother. I couldn't look. I could hear Prudence moving things around in the freezer. At least she wasn't screaming. There were no body parts in the freezer. Instead, stacked neatly were plastic containers, each with a little note attached. Brock Len gas 350, 1 hour. Prudence read, and Veg Spa and 325, 30 min. And Mac Chi, 3025, 45 min. On and on and on. What's Brock Len Cass? I said. Phoebe pried open the lid. Inside was a green and yellow hardened mass. Broccoli and lentil casserole, she said. When their father came home, he seemed surprised to see dinner on the table. Prudence showed him the freezer contents. He said. At dinner, we all ate rather quietly. I don't suppose you've heard anything from Mom? Prudence asked her father. Not yet. I think we should call the police, Phoebe said. Phoebe, I'm serious. I found some suspicious spots. Phoebe pointed toward 2 adhesive taped areas beneath the dining room table. What's that tape doing down there? He asked. Phoebe explained about the potential blood spots. Blood? Prudence said. She stopped eating. Phoebe pulled out the envelope and emptied the hair strands on the table. Strange hairs, Phoebe explained. Prudence said, Ugh. Mr. Winterbottom tapped his fork against his knife. Then he stood up, took Phoebe's arm and said, Follow me. He went to the refrigerator, opened the freezer compartment, and indicated to the plastic containers. If your mother had been kidnapped by a lunatic, would she have had time to prepare all these meals? Would she have been able to say, Excuse me, Mr. Lunatic, while I prepare 10 or 20 meals for my family to eat while I am kidnapped? You don't care, Phoebe said. Nobody cares. Everyone has his own idiot agenda. I left shortly after dinner. Mr. Winterbottom was in his study, phoning his wife's friends to see if they had any idea where she might have gone. At least, Phoebe said to me, he's taking some action, but I still think someone should call the police. As I left Phoebe's, the dead leaf crackly voice of Margaret Cadaver called over to me from her house next door. Sal, Sal. I stopped, but I did not go up to the walk. Do you want me to come in? She said. Do you want to come in? She said. I have to go home. But your father's here. We're having dessert. Want to join us? My father appeared behind her. Come on, Sal, he said. Don't be a goose. I am not a goose, I said. I already had dessert, and I'm going home to work on my English report. My father turned to Margaret. I'd better go with her. Sorry. Margaret didn't say anything. She just stood there as my father retrieved his jacket and joined me. Dad and I walked home together. I knew it was mean, but I felt as if I had won a little victory over Margaret Cadaver. On the way home, Dad asked if Phoebe's mother had come back yet. No, I said. Phoebe thinks a lunatic has carried her off. A lunatic? Isn't that a bit far-fetched? That's what I thought at first. But you never know, do you? I mean, it could happen. There could actually be a lunatic who... Sal. I was going to explain about the nervous young man and the mysterious messages, but my father would call me a goose. Instead, I said, how do you know that someone, not exactly a lunatic, but just someone, didn't make Mom go to Idaho? Maybe it was blackmail. Sal, your mother went because she wanted to go. We should have stopped her. A person isn't a bird. You can't cage a person. She shouldn't have gone. If she hadn't gone, Sal, I'm sure she intended to come back. We had reached our house, but we didn't go in. We sat on the porch steps. Dad said, you can't predict. A person can't foresee. You never know. He looked away, and I felt miserable right along with him. I apologized for being ornery and for upsetting him. He put his arm around me, and we sat there together on the porch. Two people being completely pitiful and lost.